Cageside with John Morgan.
And welcome everybody back to another episode of Cageside with John Morgan, a post-UFC 310 edition of Cageside with John Morgan. The man who was Cageside, I saw him all over the damn screen. He had his trademark blue polo on. We're just going to get right into it. We're going to announce him, bring him on the show. His name's on the marquee. Follow him on X, John Morgan _MMA. His name is John Morgan. What's up, Hal?
I'm good, man. I was in danger of not being Cageside briefly for the UFC 310 festivities, just because I was exhausted. If I'm being honest with you, I got to call some Division I college wrestling with the Iowa Hawkeyes as part of CFFC Match Day on Friday, and let me just tell you, they are good. That team is damn good. You know,
I wanted to ask you a question about that specifically because they wrestled two opponents that day.
They did.
Do they have their starters wrestle both matches?
They did. They made a couple small changes, but just very, very small changes. They took it seriously, man. I mean, bro, obviously the legendary Brands brothers are the intensity. That was my first time seeing it up close. I mean, they took it serious. Just so you know, so they were facing Princeton and Army. Princeton, their best wrestler, Ty Whalen, was out. So, I mean, they were clearly a little bit overmatched. They're a young squad. They had a lot of, like, true freshmen in there, but they're building. But Iowa took them serious. I mean, they weighed in 20 guys for the duel, knowing that they would have options, knowing that and they wouldn't give us a potential starting lineup. Like most of the teams would be like, hey, keep this under wraps, but here's kind of for your production team who we're thinking about using. They wouldn't do it. I mean, they take every match, every point, everything serious. And yeah, they ran the starters both nights, even though Princeton and Army were only wrestling one time on the night. But my goodness, I'm enjoying seeing college wrestling at that high level, but then also to see that team and the way that, like, you know, they seed nothing. There could be 20 seconds left in the match, and they've already wrapped up a decision, but they're pushing for a major decision. Or they've already wrapped up a major decision, and they're pushing for a tech fall, like, with seconds left on the clock. So it was a pleasure to watch, man. It's so good. You can watch it if you didn't get a chance to see it and you want to check it out. It's on UFC Fight Pass. You can watch the replay. It was a blast. My man Justin
They won
James,
the table both nights?
They did. Well, they lost a couple. Actually, Army gave them a really good run the first night, man. Army gave them a really good run the first part of the match, I should say. So it was really entertaining. Against Princeton, they won 9 out of 10. So I mean, that was pretty solid beating on that side. But just to watch them was incredible. But so I don't normally sleep really well after I commentate. You're excited. You got the adrenaline running, and it's hard to just lay down, especially if you got an early flight out. It's like by the time you get back to the hotel, it's like 11:30. I think I had like a 6:30 shuttle to the airport. So like I just didn't get any sleep. And I came home and I was like, man, I kind of need some rest. Like I don't want to be there like yawning at Cageside or whatever. Like I feel bad. I'm exhausted. So I thought about staying home, and I was like, no, come on, man. It's the last paper of the year. I mean, it's going to be an incredible opportunity. I mean, any chance you get to be there, go there. And I went, and glad I did, to be honest with you, man, because as much as I enjoy watching it on TV too, but man, being Cageside, there's just a different perspective, a different feel. And there were some fun performances, man. This was, I think, as we talked about going in, maybe a card that wasn't getting as much love or respect from, the casuals, really ended up delivering, man. I thought this was a fun night.
I really did too. Let's just start at the top. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this fight. It started out really fun, but then we saw the separation after maybe the first exchange or two. Pantoja versus Kai Asakura. Listen, Pantoja is good. He is a dog, right? Asakura came out. He showed the flash that made him a superstar in Rizin. He showed that, but then the separation after that couple early little flashes, the separation was evident. It's clear cut. Pantoja is the best in the world.
Oh, unbelievable. And I think you're right. I think it played out if pretty much like most people thought it would, which is, listen, if you've never seen Kai Asakura fight before, he's fun. He's exciting. Right. You're going to like what you see. And I think there's a bright future for him in the UFC, whether or not that lies at flyweight, whether or not it lies at bantamweight. That'll be his decision to make. He fought at both over in Japan, and he's a big dude at flyweight. But you saw it, right? I mean, the excitement was there. He's got some swagger to him.
The speed that dude operated with.
the speed is unbelievable. Those flying knees that he has, those leaping knees, just how fast he's able to leap into them and throw. I mean, unbelievable. A couple of them look like they landed, and Pantoja just dealt with it well. So really, really exciting. I think he's going to cause some people some problems. But yeah, Pantoja, man, he just looks really good. And what I think is so cool to see about this fight is just how good he looked on the feet, right? I mean, here's Asakura with all the speed, with all the creativity, with all the power, and Pantoja's walking him down, and he's the one pushing the aggression. He's the one, saying, I'm not going to let you dictate the pace. I'm going to dictate the pace. So he does that in the opening round. But then it's the opposite aspect of the game. It's the grappling, which was, I know as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, what a fan you are, high-level grappling, and man, just the trip takedown, the jump over to the back, the switching of the I mean, everything that he did in the submission exchange and setting it up and executing it was flawless. So, I mean, when you see somebody that is that good on the feet, that good on the ground, I mean, I don't even know which aspect of his game I would say I thought looked better on the night. It was just an incredibly well-rounded performance for Pantoja. And, man, he is starting to put together a little legacy, a little run. And man, he's one of the greats in the game right now. There's no question about it.
So he's cleaned out the division to a degree.
Yeah.
I think logically speaking, Royval is next in line unless there's something other to be done there. But Brandon Royval, I mean, that guy's a beast. He's been lobbying for it, talking a lot of smack after fights. I think everybody's a fan of him. Is that the next fight? Or since the division has been cleared out and since they even brought somebody, from another promotion in and gave him a title shot, is there something else, in line for Pantoja? And the reason I say all that is I usually would just say, hey, Brandon Royval. But then there was talking to Demetrious Johnson yesterday, which obviously got shut down right away. And so I don't know if they're looking at it as like, hey, do we need something bigger for this guy now? I know the flyweights meddle in this, somewhat obscurity. So do we try and make this bigger or is it Brandon Royval? And that's no disrespect to either guy. It's
I thought about the same thing you did, right? Because here's the thing is like had Amir Albazi won against Brandon Moreno, then I think you go with Amir Albazi because it's the new name. It's the fresh matchup. He'd had that nice win streak, but he didn't. So now you got Royval sitting there, but there's history there. It wasn't that long ago. You got Moreno there. There's history there. So Royval seems to be the most likely one. There's some mention of maybe Kai France because it's a fresh matchup. But here's the problem there is that it's a little bit further down the rankings. I don't know that anybody's necessarily pining for it. And you missed the other part of like needing like a fight in Australia or something like that, right? Because you just had the 2 title fights that got announced for Australia last night. So you don't need a championship matchup there. So that kind of throws that one, the geographical ties that. Now, if it's another opportunity for Pantoja to fight in Brazil, then maybe it doesn't matter who he's fighting, just as long as he's competing, right? He fought Steve Erceg there, and that one didn't necessarily make sense, but it was a championship matchup. So a lot of moving parts right now. The Demetrious Johnson thing, I'm glad you said it. It's not going to happen. I don't hate him saying it though, because at least like it gets that conversation going. Like, hey, where do I belong? All time. And look, when you're a champion, you don't have to call people out, right? They got to call you out, so you don't have to be as savvy about who you call out. So to answer your question, kind of long-winded answer to it, but it's just I wanted to kind of walk through the scenarios because there's not one to me that says like this has to be the one. So for that instance, I think it's either Kai France in Brazil. They don't have a Brazil date announced yet. But if you're looking for a fight there, or I think,
but they have a lot of TBDs.
You got a lot.
They're having a fight card TBD.
Exactly. You got a lot of those. So if they decide to do it early, I think maybe you go with Kai France because it's kind of the fresher matchup. Or if not, and you just want it somewhere else, you go with Royval because who doesn't like watching Royval compete? And I know they didn't fight all that long ago, but he's got swagger. He's fun. He sells it. They'll talk a little bit. They'll have.
And he dragged him into deep water. Let's be honest.
He did, man, and it'd be a fun fight. So to me, if you're not worried about business and geography and all those things, I think that's the one you go with right now. But if not, I think you might see a pivot. We're definitely not doing it. Like I said, I'm glad you. We're definitely not going to see Demetrious Johnson. We don't even know if that's contractually possible. We know he retired with one, but just because you retired doesn't mean necessarily that your contract is gone. It's out the window. But Demetrious came out immediately on his own social media platforms and was like, "Nah, bro, I'm done. That's not happening."
Yeah. It will be time will tell. Interesting to see, but I do want to go to Ian Garry and Rakhmonov. Yeah. All right. Now, some people need to eat some crow for bashing me about saying this was a bad matchup. Yeah. I think it proved out that this was a bad matchup, or that it's like both of these guys are just that good. But the line, irregardless, whether you want to admit that I was right or not, the line was crazy. Ian Garry showed it that it was crazy. And I'm sorry if these beepings. I had to restart my computer, by the way. It's driving me crazy.
I was just trying to work through it over there, but yeah, this man's getting a full system update in the middle.
It's crazy. But anyways, Ian Garry showed that he does deserve at the top. I think his post-fight interview was spectacular at the press conference.
Yep.
This is not to diminish Rakhmonov. He is the next guy for Belal Muhammad, but time for people to put some respect on Ian Garry's names. And if you put comments in the section of last week's episode, which a couple of you did, time to retract them.
I love it. No, you're right about it. Listen, I think this proved a lot more great. Look, you and I said we were shocked at the line here, right? You and I both felt like this was kind of a pick-em type matchup, that this was, incredible. We love the matchmaking, but the way the styles come together, the way the body types come together, the way the skills come together, we thought this was a much closer fight than it felt like a lot of people did. And I feel like, not that we need to pat ourselves on, but I feel like we were proven right in that. And I do believe, I think you're 100% right. I think people just, if you've wanted to hate on Ian Machado Garry, and we've talked about it, it seems like people want to hate on him because of his personality, because of his wife, because of whatever. I mean, all stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with the skills that are happening inside of the cage. It's time maybe you take those, take the blinders off and look at what's really happening there. The man is a very skilled athlete, and I do think he handled himself incredibly well in that post-fight interview. I think he explained it properly. He didn't try to say, I didn't lose. He didn't try to say, like, hey, I'm arguing with the judge's decision. He just said, listen, I lost by some people's choices, right? But I was the one that was closer to finishing this fight. By opinion.
Right?
I love it, man.
Because I had him winning 2 rounds. I think it was round 3 and round 5.
And that's the way all 3 judges had it, and I had it exactly the same as you.
I think it showed that if this fight was going longer, Ian Garry was I'm not going to say the fresher fighter or whatever, but it was so hard to take him down to the ground. I think the strikes, I thought Ian Garry was going to get better at the striking exchanges. He really didn't in that fight, that surprised me a little bit. But I think that he was a little more tentative. We saw him loosening up as the fight went on. So that leads me to believe now there's never a round 6, 7, and 8. But had there been, or in a rematch, I think this is a different fight or a somewhat more exciting fight. But to bring it back to what Ian Garry said in the post-fight press conference, which I think is spectacular. He says, listen, class in win and he was like, or loss, but it was an opinion. And albeit the right opinion. And he goes, but the boogeyman of the division, the one nobody wants to fight, the one that everybody's scared of, the one that I decided on 3 weeks' notice to take the fight, I lost by opinion. But let's not mistake, this guy has finished everybody he has ever fought, but I had more finishing sequence than him. I was closer to finishing the fight. I was this, I was that, and he was right on everything. So I think a lot of times you look at a fight and say, this guy's going to get overwhelmed. And me and you both know styles make fights. And this was a great stylistic matchup. And that's why 1 week ago, I said, this is a tough/bad matchup for Rakhmonov. And it played out. Rakhmonov was still the better fighter that night, hands down. But Ian Machado Garry is right there. And I really think it's 1, because people don't like him. 2, he's outspoken. He's brash. He's a Conor McGregor, a Timu Conor McGregor, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with is he just doesn't look the part.
Yeah.
I think perception is reality to people a lot of times.
No, you're 100% right about that too, because it's all those things that you said, and I think why people have just not given Garry the respect that they need to do. But I saw this opinion, and I felt the same way, man. Like that. I feel like Ian Garry in a loss probably got more respect than he has in a lot of his wins, or should have. I mean, again, if you're taking all those extraneous things out of it and just looking at the skill set, that he brings to the cage, I think you got to give him a lot of respect. And you talk about being the first guy to take Rakhmonov the distance. I mean, this guy had finished every fight, and this was 5 rounds, right? He had 5 rounds, not 3. He had an extra 10 minutes to work on you, and he couldn't get that done. And listen, and again, I want to make it clear, we think the right man won. Neither of us are arguing with it. But to your point about the finishing sequence, if this is like pride scoring, right? If we're scoring this fight as a whole, which
or
we're not, one championship, right? If we're scoring it that way, you're giving this fight to Ian Machado Garry, right? I mean, he's the one that came closer to finishing the fight. He's the one that had the more finishing sequences. And I think I love what you said too, because the one thing that I will say, I think when Garry watches this back, is that he'll kind of regret that he was so tentative in those striking exchanges. I think that proved very problematic for him, because I thought the same thing. I thought he was going to have more advantage on the feet, and he didn't necessarily display that at all.
Listen, I have so much respect for Ian Garry, right? One, you guys know how I feel about men that like parade their family around. I'm a big fan of that, right?
Yep.
He does that. He's not ashamed. We can talk about the ex all they want, but the way I look at that is he's still allowing a father to be in the child's life. I think that's amazing, right? Great. Take that to the side. I like him for those reasons, that he's a family man, right? Then he's a guy who's going to call his shot. He does not talk a lot of smack. He is very confident in what he says, so it's misconstrued as he's talking a lot of shit when he's really not. We go back. I think it was great in what he said lead up to the fight. Hey, Rakhmonov said he subbed you in training. He's like, yeah, he did. But you know what? I'm there to get better. I'm not fighting as hard as I can in every position. In fact, I'm being put in certain positions on purpose to get better. Don't take that. If you're hanging your hat on that, or if he is, you're sadly mistaken. And that proved right. So I don't think that he's this monumental trash talker. I think he's very brash, and he's very opinionated, and he's very confident, and it's misconstrued a lot of times. But for all those, he's a great fighter, and I'm a big Ian Garry fan.
I am too, man. I'm glad you said that. I am as well. And you're right about that. I think the confidence is spot on, right? He's one of these guys that truly just manifest things. Look, this is my path, and I'm going to put every ounce of my energy into following this path because I know exactly what it is. You need that type of laser focus to be successful. You know what I mean? To say, this is the way I'm doing it. And you're right. I think it's construed the wrong way. I love what you said about the family man as well. I saw him at the Apex on Tuesdays carrying his kid everywhere he goes throughout the thing, man. So I love that aspect of him as well. And listen, man, I thought this was a phenomenal fight, man. I thought he showed the skills. I think he showed at 27 years old, he's just kind of now entering his athletic prime. He's man, the way he travels around the world to soak in training from everywhere. And by the way, another great point from you, talking about, getting submitted in training. What you need to put yourself in bad positions to train. If the only way you ever train is like we're starting neutral and I'm on top or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, no, you need to start training with, hey, you start on my back, you start in mount on me, and that may not be successful for you. In fact, it's probably not going to be successful for me most times. But if you're never putting yourself in those situations, you're not going to react well to them when you're in a fight. So listen, man, again, and while we're saying all this, credit to Shavkat Rakhmonov because he fought out of those bastards. By the way, some of the submission attempts that he was in, I was like, Gary's got him. But he countered perfectly and he escaped. And so he deserves it. And I'm looking really forward to Belal Muhammad. And I tweeted this last night, and I'll say it again. You have to give Shavkat Rakhmonov so much respect as well. In the same way that we're praising Garry, you got to give Shavkat respect for saying he already had a title fight. The champion, not you, the challenger. The champion had to step out of the matchup. You could very easily say, hey, I'll wait for you, champ, heal up. I'm not giving up my title shot. For Shavkat to say, I'll give up my title shot. I'll take on, I'm the boogeyman. I'll take on this other guy over here that also happens to be undefeated as well, who we know, very much. I mean, the guy's got skills. For him to go out and win, I love that. I'm looking very forward to him and Belal Muhammad as well. But, yeah, man, I do hope that even in defeat, this is a result where people can really start to give Ian Garry the respect that they need to, because I think that guy, look, he came up short here, but that's not the end of his career by any stretch. I think this guy will challenge for a championship and perhaps hold gold at some point down the road. He showed that he's got a lot of skills. And
if past precedent is any indicator of future, we've seen guys like Ian Machado Garry who are rock solid here with the skills. What does that loss do for him? bam. It's such a learning. He never had to go through that. He's never had that much. He's had adversity in a lot of fights. Not like that. Not one where he was constantly having to stave off attacks and takedowns and whatnot. And truth be told, that was a lot of where Rakhmonov won this fight, is just because of the aggression was a little bit more there. And I did say that Rakhmonov was going to be the one chasing. We both agreed, or pushing the pace, and that happened. But if he won the striking exchanges, it was on a 2-to-1 spectrum on very little strikes. Ian Machado Garry actually was beating up those legs, and he wasn't going up high as much as he needed. So I think the flash or the visual perspective of a lot of people were like, he clearly won the striking exchanges. Rakhmonov did. But I think the nuance of it, he didn't clearly win those striking exchanges.
Yeah, I certainly didn't feel that way. And I love when you talk about the mental side of it as well, right? Because that first loss, I mean, man, it can devastate somebody. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, it can send you into a spiral where you're questioning, every decision you've made and whether or not you really have it. And, there's imposter syndrome that sets in, and it's soul crushing. And man, that dude, it just like fortified him. Is like, you see, you know what I mean? I can't. This close I was with everything against me, was stepping in on short notice. Everybody's saying this is the guy that nobody wants. And I was right here. So guess where I'm going to be, in a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever. Incredible, man. So I thought this was a great performance. It was a fight that, I could see a lot of people saying, it wasn't quite the barn burner we expected to be. And again, I think Garry could have been a little bit more active in his striking.
It wasn't going to be it. We told you.
We said it wasn't going to be. And it was a tactical battle, man. And I actually really enjoyed it. I am glad it played out over 5 rounds. We did get to see a quick uniform change, a quick shorts change in the middle of it. Never seen that. That was wild. Kudos to the UFC uniform team over there to just rush in with the backup shorts when the original shorts got torn. To be honest, I actually haven't gone back and watched the tape. I'm assuming it was up against the fence or something where something snagged on it.
It never showed on the broadcast exactly, but they were like, hey, well, what do you expect when Rakhmonov is driving you up against a cage like that? What I thought was great about that is, he was getting advice from the corner. They're trying to change him the whole 9 yards. And at the very end, it's like, oh, hurry up. And he's like, you guys are going to need to be patient. You're forcing me to do this.
Yeah.
And I think that he is so much wiser than 27 years old. That's a long way of saying he's so much wiser. Not only in the way he fights. He's like, hey, you guys are forcing me to do this. I'm going to take my time. You're not going to rush me.
Yeah, and you know what? That's spot on, right? And I think he has the right to do that, because it wasn't if he was the one saying, "Hey, I need to change these shorts," like trying to buy time. Because I saw some people saying like, "Hey, man, should that be allowed? Like, what is this?" Like, look, it's not his call. He's like, "I'll keep fighting. You let me go." You know what I mean? So I thought that was really wise.
It's not his call. Like it's a timeout. It's essentially a referee's timeout. A referee's timeout can take 10 seconds or 20 minutes. I mean, if that happened to a woman, you know what? They may have to take her into the back to change it. Yeah. The fight's still going to continue. So anybody complaining about time or that he wanted an extra second, that is nonsense. They don't know what they're talking about.
No.
It's just part of the process. No fault of anybody. We have to have the required equipment. It has to be in working order. If that takes 10 seconds or if that takes 10 minutes, it's irregardless.
I think you're spot on with that, and obviously you're a trained official that's in there, and I didn't feel like there was any gamesmanship on his part. Absolutely. He was trying to gain time. And look, I mean, you got to make sure your uniform fits. You're not going out there into a fist fight against one of the toughest dudes in the world, and it's not feeling. People don't understand. I mean, like, it's got to feel right. You know what I mean? Like, everything's got to feel a little bit comfortable. I mean, everything's got to make the adjustments. So I thought he handled himself well. It was just a weird situation. It unfolded right there in front of me. I was like, I don't think I've ever seen this before. This is
and not only like the feel of it, it's like you can't break your mental, you're locked in mentally.
Yes.
You're just being told stuff from your corner. You're locked in mentally on this fight. You have external forces. He's like, I'm not going to let this. And that's why I say he's so much wiser than 27 years old. I'm not going to let this break my mental focus. Hold on. I'll do it. Calm down, and he's still in his zone. He's not letting that transition any of his mental away from what he's doing. He's doing it in the process of staying mentally engaged.
Hey, what's funny is I know we're going to talk the remainder of UFC 310, but I want to share something that happened to me this past week as that'll be interesting to you as an official that I've also never seen before. I was at Tough Enough this past week. It's on UFC Fight Pass. You can watch the replay. It was at the Sahara Theater in Las Vegas. But a fighter that was trying to lock up a triangle choke put their toes into the cage, right? Which obviously, you're not allowed to do. It's just like fingers and that sort of thing. Chris Tione was the referee. Excuse me, Mike Bell was the referee. He saw it. He said, no, get it out of there. So he addressed it. But at some point in putting that foot in the cage, the toenail on one of the feet, the big toe, bent completely back and was at a 90-degree angle and eventually fell off. And it was one of the most ghastly, nasty images. I know it's just a toenail, but it was gross. But just something maybe, to consider. I don't know that was ever intended in the rule set. Obviously, when they say you can't put your toes there, it's because you don't want that leverage. But hey, there's another reason as well, man. When you're sticking it over there, you might catch that thing a little bit wrong. And next thing you know, this dude's toenail got ripped completely off. So 2 things I saw this past week. And this is why we love MMA. And all the stuff, all the fights and all the years, 2 things I've never seen in MMA happen to me just this past week.
When you're describing it, I did a...
Oh, bro. It was like I'm looking at it. I'm like, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? And then from there on out, and credit to this fighter, it happened in the first round. He continued fighting until the 3rd round. But I will say this. He didn't throw any kicks with that right foot where the toenail was missing after that one. He threw some left kicks.
It must have been stinging like a...
It had to be. And I tell you another funny part of it. It was Mike Bell. He addressed that, but he didn't see the toenail come off. So between round 1 and 2, I had to take my headset off, and I was pointing to the mat over there. I was like, bro, the big toenails right there.
Toenail.
I was like, can you clear? He's like, what? I'm like, it's out. Look on the logo. It's under the U right there. He's like, what? And he saw it. He's like, ah.
Oh, that's gross. All right. So no controversy in the Ian Machado Garry and Rakhmonov fight. But there potentially was some controversy. Ciryl Gane, Alexander Volkov. How'd you score the fight?
I had it for Alexander Volkov, if I'm being honest with you. I had it the exact same way that Eric Colon did, giving him rounds 2 and round 3. Junichiro Kamijo, who's a longtime judge here in Nevada, who I've always been a fan of his cards from the very beginning of the amateur days at Tough Enough, where he was just getting started. He was one of the ones, along with Adelaide Bird, that had it 1 and 2 for Ciryl Gane, but I just didn't see it that way, to be honest with you, man. I thought it should have been Volkov 2 and 3.
Yeah, I mean, I don't put a lot of stock into throwing a submission that you're not going to get and it reverses you position.
Right.
I don't.
Yep.
Now, that being said, early on, he may have been a little bit busier, ended up on his back. He had positional control in round 1, was revert. It's a tough round. It's a tough to score. I think if we pooled all, and this is why there's sometimes that judging it round by round doesn't tell the full story. I can argue that nobody scored it incorrectly. I can argue that. I disagree.
Yeah. All 3 judges had round 1 for Ciryl Gane. All 3 judges had round 3 for Alexander Volkov. It all comes down to how you have round 2, which, as you said, there's some arguments to go both ways.
But what I'm going to say, though, is that, I think if everybody looks at it, I think everybody would say that, Volkov probably, if the fight was judged as a full, won the fight. Right. But it's not. And that's kind of a problem. And that's why I really like, Joe Rogan's take. A lot of times he's like, if this is truly a fight, man, maybe we should restart him in the position they ended the previous round. Like, why does the striker get the advantage every single round? Why doesn't the grappler get to get, whatever, neither here nor there. It's just not going to get regulated. And
it's not, but it's an interesting argument, though.
But I'm just saying it tells us a bigger story. Either way, I think none of this, unfortunately, did anything to have people clamor to say, we want to see that guy versus Tom Aspinall if Jones doesn't fight him. We didn't get anything to that.
It's so fun. I'm so glad you went there, because that's the takeaway that I had from this as well. So thought it was a close fight. Like you said, if you're scoring in a hole, which I'm not a proponent of scoring in a hole, because I just think it's especially if you're talking about a 25-minute fight, for a judge to weigh equally what happened in minute 1 versus minute 25. I think it's physically, humanly impossible to do mentally. So I don't like it. But you're right. It just felt like Volkov won it. Now you can go back to round 2. So here or there, how you want to talk about controversy, discussion, whatever. But that was the big takeaway I had. I was like, I wonder how many zeros just got added to the offer for Jon Jones to fight Tom Aspinall, right? Like, is Jon Jones just sitting back being like, oh, who needs to come talk to Bones now, right? Who needs me? Because you're right. Either way, and again, not that like if Volkov had won, it wasn't like this was like, let's say the fight played out exactly the way it did, but Volkov is given the decision. All right. Now he's clearly the number one contender, but you still don't have people going, oh, let's get this Jon Jones kid out of here so we can just have Aspinall versus Volkov. You know what I mean? It would still just feel like a little bit of a kind of title fight. So yeah, to be honest with you, I just feel like that fight right there did nothing to add any excitement to any matchup whatsoever for Tom Aspinall, regardless of how the decision went. And I feel like it just put a little bit more. I feel like Jon Jones had to be sitting back, just watching, just kind of giggling a little bit, and be like, "Well, hey guys, phone number's still the same, address is still the same. If you want to send that Brinks truck over here, you know exactly where to send it, and then we can talk." So it's funny that you had that take, because that's exactly the way I thought about it as well.
I think everybody's not everybody's favorite fighter, but everybody's maybe they look at him as the most entertaining personality, Bryce Mitchell, fighting a Kron Gracie on the card. That was fun. Bryce Mitchell was put into a very precarious position in that round number 2. Passed through it. He's bulletproof. I've known him for a long time. I'm not close with him. I'm not friends with him. I've refed him a lot on some of his pro fights. That guy is bulletproof in his head. So when he says like I wasn't going to tap, I knew he was not going to tap.
He means it. You could break the arm and he's going to still sit there. If the referee stops it, that's up to him, but he's going to keep fighting. Bryce Mitchell is such an intriguing guy. Like I said, I ran into him at the Apex on Tuesday before I traveled out of town, and man, he's so polite. Just he walked right up. Hey, how you doing? Great to see you. I was like, man, I got to be honest, I'm really looking forward to this fight. It could be exciting. You know how Bryce is. He's like, well, now that you said that, I'm going to make sure it's exciting. I'm like, yeah, of course you weren't going to try to before that, but that's just how he is. He's a polite dude. He's a great dude. Take his politics and I was gonna say, take his politics and his beliefs. Like, I don't understand the I'm against seatbelts thing. Like, whatever. But I get, he's got some weird feelings on it. But he's a fun fighter, and he's a good dude. He's just an earnest guy. You know what I mean? He's not trying to, if you like what he says or not. I mean, he's just trying to be kind out there in the world and live the life the way he wants to live. But this was exciting. Kron Gracie, like you said, I have a lot of respect for Kron Gracie. I ran to Kron this week as well, and I felt like he was a lot more at ease this week and a lot more happy than I've seen him before. But this is just not the style of MMA that's going to be effective in the sport at this point. It's just evolved past this. Still dangerous. His jiu-jitsu is incredible. He nearly had the fight finish in the second round, and we could be having a completely different discussion if he breaks that arm and the referee has to stop the fight, right? And now we're saying, well, isn't it a throwback? To the fact that this dude is basically just pulling guard and saying that I'm going to live, by what my family decided. And can we give just big props to Bryce Mitchell for saying that man is a Gracie?
Yeah, I love that.
God, I love that. We all owe a debt of gratitude. I'll be honest with you. I actually, and I sit in press row, and other than when Max Holloway knocks out Justin Gaethje and I lose my absolute mind, I try to carry myself with a lot of
journalistic integrity.
Yeah, I try to carry myself. I try to carry myself with a little bit of journalistic integrity. But to that, I even clap, because it's 100% true. Like, no matter if we never see another Gracie win inside the octagon again, we all owe that family a huge debt of gratitude for the sport that we love. So I thought that was a great. But Bryce Mitchell did what you did. You cannot pull guard in mixed martial arts. Maybe once. Maybe you can get away with it once because you can have that element of surprise. But you saw exactly what happens when you pull guard in MMA. Gerald Harris, the great Hurricane. Gerald Harris had some slams like this. If somebody tries to pull guard on you and you are in a standing position, that is exactly the way you counter. You put that forearm up there and you slam them. And it's, look, you compete at a high level in grappling. You can't slam in a jiu-jitsu tournament because of exactly that. Now, in MMA, when, you don't even have to pretend like you're not slamming. No, you can slam at full speed and you can throw the forearm on top of it. You just can't get away with that more than maybe once in a mixed martial arts contest. And unfortunately, Kron Gracie went back to the well a few too many times, and Bryce Mitchell made him pay for it. And Kron was out for a little while, man. I mean, obviously the shots that followed added to it, but I mean, that slam was where it all started. Yeah, I mean, and
Let's take the submission attempt out of it. It was very close. It was,
Yes.
I in my opinion, I think Bryce got a little complacent in there because Bryce Mitchell's jiu-jitsu is off the charts. Even Rolly Delgado in his corner and Willie McLaughlin in his corner and AJ Cunningham, who was in his corner. All three are freaking really cool dudes, by the way. Rolly said to him, he's like, hey, man, move your feet, this, that, and the other. You're doing great on the feet. And, the ground is what it is. You're better than him. I'm not going to say that he's better than him. I think he was more, I guess, more well-rounded to a degree.
Right.
That Gracie jiu-jitsu style is not rudimentary, but it's very basic. And the reason I say that is he kept on going back to the same thing that was not working every single time. When you're crunching on that top arm like that, you can either do one of two things. You're locking down that shoulder to then maybe eventually get a straight arm bar from that position, which is extremely tough to get against anybody who's a really high level grappler. Or you can use it to get that 100% butterfly sweep. And every single time, it'd start getting straight. You can't get it straight as if your head is over his head. So one, it wasn't getting there. The one or two times it did, all you got to do is kind of like just swim it in before it's too late. And Bryce Mitchell did it. And it just seemed like that's my only go-to. That's my only go-to. That's my only go-to, which is just inputting data for Bryce Mitchell. Okay, next time he does this, bing, bang, boom. And then he pulled the guard. It was academic from there. And Bryce Mitchell hurt him very badly on the feet as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, you want to see, Crohn's, obviously the grappling pedigree is there, but what you'd like to see is, okay, if you go to that as your basic setup and that's your starting position, fine, but then what's your chain off of that? And then what's your chain off of that? That's where you see, and that's what's so fun to watch about grappling, at a very high level is like, well, I went for this submission, but it's not because I thought I was even going to come close to get that submission. It's that I know what your counter is going to be, and that's going to open up the next thing to me. That's why I talk about human chess, and it didn't feel like that. You know what I mean? So I have no problem with guys that, they seemingly have their go-to. If their go-to is basically just like 1A, so they can set up B, C, D off of that. And it just didn't feel like that was the plan here. And again, it was almost effective. And again, we could be having a completely different discussion where we're like, how cool is that here's this throwback fighter that's old school, that's basically just staying true to his family's roots, and he gets the victory here. But that just wasn't the case. And unfortunately, I think that's probably going to be the end of the UFC career for Kron Gracie, which I think he's fine. I just get the feeling, I don't know him very well, but the brief interactions I've had with him, I get the feeling that this isn't really like his passion, but almost just like something like, hey, this is our family pedigree, and it's a great opportunity, and it's something maybe you love to do in the gym. But there's a different thing between loving to train and loving to do it in the gym versus loving to really get out there. I never really get the sense from him that he just absolutely loves being in that octagon more than any place on earth. You know what I mean? And if you don't, it's a tough way to make a living.
Well, I mean, he's very stoic, so it's kind of hard to tell, too, right?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I always go back to, like, the guy's tough as nails. He's a dog. There's no quitting him. I mean, go back to the Cub Swanson fight, which was so fun. And I want to go back to what Bryce Mitchell did say about, hey, he's a Gracie. Like, these guys, shed blood in this octagon so we can all be here today.
Love it.
I love that because Bryce Mitchell, he says some crazy stuff, right? He's a flat earther. Get him on. Listen, I don't ever like or dislike anybody based off of any of that stuff. For people to dislike Bryce Mitchell, like his character in, like, as you said, in the way he talks to you, the way he talks to the media, and then going above and beyond and doing something like that, he's just a class act guy, albeit crazy as shit. He's a class act, man.
I'm with you, man. I like the guy. Again, I've said it before. I say, yeah, Thug Nasty, man. I loved it from those very early days when he was on that World Series of Fighting co-promotion, and he's just like, talking about why he's got the name Thug Nasty. And I'm like, man, this guy is not one is he's exciting, but he's funny and I like him a lot. And yeah, I thought that message was awesome. And I hope it's a message that a lot of people get. And I'm sure a lot of newer fans probably don't understand. It's been a long time since we've seen a Gracie being successful at the highest level of the sport, but the sport doesn't exist without them. You know what I mean? And I think it's unbelievable the debt of gratitude that we all have. And so I love to see that sign of respect, man. It really goes back to the earliest days of the sport, and man, much deserved. I thought that was classy.
So thinking back, I'm like, hey, what could be next for Bryce Mitchell? Maybe he's not right up there at the tippity top of that division, but he's pretty damn close. So what's next for him? I started looking, and some people are throwing out Brian Ortega, and I love that matchup.
I love that matchup too. I like that one a lot, man. I really do like that one. I hadn't thought about that one. It's a little higher up the food chain right now, up the rankings right now, but stylistically it makes some sense. And Ortega's already had so much history with the guys up at the top of the division that maybe it's time to, start looking outside of those top tier matchups. So stylistically, man, I love that one, man. That'd be a lot of fun. I was just kind of taking a quick glance at my rankings update. Aljamain Sterling. Maybe that's one in there as well. You know what I mean? Who knows? But
getting in the same weight class.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So I like something like that. That'd be some interesting matchups. So there's some fun ones for him.
All right, well, let's just get into Aljamain Sterling. Listen, we said before, when we get two badass grapplers, we want to see some badass grappling. We got two badass grapplers, and we got some badass grappling. And I still have trouble pronouncing his name, even though I said it 100 times. So go ahead.
Movsar Evloev.
Evloev.
Yeah.
See, it doesn't roll off my.
I just it's something close to that anyway. Movsar.
That was such a fun fight, and if anybody says it wasn't, then you know what? Usually I say, as an MMA guy, bring all the fans, and I want you all on the train. I don't care. You guys can come on late. But if you didn't think that was a fun fight because you didn't like grappling, I don't want you on this train. Get the bleep off, because that fight was fun as hell.
I loved it too, man. I again, Evloev, Movsar, whatever you want to call it, that dude is,
shredded,
powerful, like so powerful, man. And it's incredible to see Aljo, how relaxed he is in there and comfortable in there at this point in his career. And man, yeah, these two high level grappling on display, back and forth, razor thin fight. I was sitting right next to Kevin Iole, and I think he had it for Aljo. I had it for Evloev, and I thought it was just, to me, it all comes down to basically the very end of the third round. You know what I mean? And how things played out.
Evloev was one fractional step ahead the whole time.
I did too, just a little bit, man. And that comes from somebody that, to be honest, is an Aljamain Sterling homer, right? CFFC Hall of Famer. I followed his career for a long time. Yeah, and where's it, dude? He had it on this fight week, and I thought that was so cool. It's such a cool little medallion that the CFFC team put together, and he was wearing it this week along with his Funk Harbor rum stuff, and I thought that was so cool to see all fight week as well. I saw him at the Apex on Tuesday as well, and thought that was incredible to see. But yeah, man. So I'm an Aljamain hurler, and it just felt like Movsar was just a little bit ahead, but it was fun, man. The exchanges, the power, the takedowns, the scrambles, the reversals, man. These two dudes, they're as good as it gets. It's
neither one of these guys was willing to give up an inch in the grappling. They were not willing to give up an inch.
None.
And then that's why I loved it, especially as a grappling enthusiast, is there were a lot of big movements, right? But what you don't see, unless you're really, really looking for it, is the small little movements. And there was hundreds of these small little movements, or the movements were like, I'm not going to move until I see what your move.
I was going to say there were some positions that were like, I'm sure again, to the uneducated eye, the casual eye, whatever, it's fine. I'm not trying to put anybody down, but if you don't know exactly what you're looking for, you're like, oh, they're stalling right here. And it's like, no. It's like, I feel your weight. And the moment it shifts, I know exactly what direction you're going in, and I know exactly what direction I'm countering with. And it's like, wait, hold on. I got to stay here because I'm seeing what you're, you know what I mean? It's just, I can't do it yet because I know you know, and you know that I know. And so it has to be exactly right. It has to be the perfect explosion. It's like when somebody tries, to advance from like half mount to mount, and if you feel it at the exact moment that they're there, that's when you turn underneath, you know what I mean? And so it was those little traps and those little setups. It was fun to watch. It really was.
I don't think this loss hurt Aljo at all, truth be told.
Nah.
It was such a close fight that, he was like a plus 200 dog, right, going into this. if I remember correctly. So by the sheer fact that he came out, took him down, nearly had his back in the first minute and a half, I was like, dude, Aljamain Sterling is that good. And Evloev, I mean, obviously he's that good. He was one step ahead of Aljamain all night.
Yeah, I'm really interested, man, because now you're talking about 19-0 for Movsar. Now you're talking about likely a title shot against the undefeated Ilia Topuria. So, I mean, that's beautiful, right? There's not a lot of opportunities to see two undefeated athletes go at it, and that seems to be the natural next matchup right now. And grappling wise, and again, like I said, Movsar, dude, like shredded. The power is on
He said
display.
he will not touch sugar until he gets the title shot.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, the discipline that he has, that dude is a stud. We didn't see it here. We haven't seen a whole. I mean, I do think that Ilia's striking, and obviously, I think we're gonna have time to break this down because that'll be that. I think that's the matchup next. Ilia's striking could be very problematic in this, but if Movsar is able to get this into grappling exchanges, he's big, he's strong, he's powerful, he's skilled. That could make it very entertaining. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the next matchup, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
Hell yes, I'm here for it.
Nope.
Dude, I mean, yeah. I just like out of this fight that both guys were willing to engage. And I think John Anik said it best in the Bryce Mitchell Kron Gracie, which I think it applies to this fight as well. Just because it's somebody else's strength doesn't mean you don't play to your strength as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's a great point. Yeah, obviously since I was there, I didn't hear the commentary, but I like that assessment. That is true. Especially listen, I mean, if you feel like there's an easier target area where it makes sense for you to attack somebody because they're so deficient somewhere, then that might, mean that you change your approach. But you're right. If that's your game, stick with your game. You know what I mean? Stick with what got you there. Stick with what makes you who you are. Don't shy away from that, even if that means that you have to go head to head with somebody that's very strong in that department as well.
Yeah. Now, last thing before we kind of wrap this up is Anthony Lionheart-Smith. Yeah. Dominic Reyes. We never touched on this before because I wasn't aware, truth be told. Like I didn't realize, but losing his best friend, his trainer, a guy who'd been in his corner of all of his pro career except one fight. Obviously emotion all over his face. Whether was he all there in that fight or wasn't he, remains to be seen. Or probably not. He admitted so. But either way, gutsy performance with that adversity, but it was hard to watch at the very end of that. I mean, and just taking a lot of punishment, resigned to his fate there to a degree, and then basically just saying at the tail end of it, like, I just don't know if I can do this anymore. Like, that was kind of hard to watch.
It was really hard to watch. I've told the story many times, but I've known Anthony Smith for a long time. And the first time that he ever introduced himself to me, I was sitting in an airport bar after I'd done commentary an event, and a guy walks up to me and he's like, "Hey man, John Morgan." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I want to introduce myself. My name's Anthony Smith." He's like, "You're going to be covering me in the UFC one day." And I was, just talked to him briefly. He didn't hang out very long, but he just introduced himself to me, said that, you're going to be covering me in the UFC one day, and I look forward to it. And I was like, man, this dude, big dude, well-spoken, confident. Like, who is he, man? I never heard of him before. And I looked him up, as soon as he walked away, politely, I pulled out the Fight Finder on Sherdog, and he was like 4-7 at the time on a 4-fight losing streak. And I was like, whoa, you know what I mean? But it stuck with me just because he's such a big dude, well-spoken. He had that confidence even at that point in his career. And damn it if he didn't make it to the UFC once, but twice even, you know what I mean? And so I've just always been such an Anthony Smith fan. And you're right. When we spoke last week, I was not aware of the loss either. And I heard about that later in the week. I think listening to Anik and Florian's podcast, and John Anik was talking about, having the fighter meeting with him. And boy, you could see it when he walked in. I've been cage side for a lot of it, and just the motion that he was battling. And I think they did at one point, the camera did pan back to him. Even when it was Dominic Reyes, it was like, but I mean, it was just, he was fighting back the emotion. He was trying to get support from his team, but it was just an energy that I'd never seen before. You know what I mean? And I just felt like, oh God, this is hard to watch. And then he goes out there in the fight, and he's doing what he can do, and he's scrapping a little bit. But then in that second round, you could just see that, he wasn't there. You know what I mean? That wasn't the Anthony Smith that we saw. And, he stayed down on the ground afterwards for a long time. I didn't hate
the jiu-jitsu black belt, and he stayed turtled up the whole time. He didn't even really pull guard. He didn't try to. He
wasn't trying to get out of the position. I didn't hate the stoppage at all. I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, come on, there's nothing." But you could just see that's a guy that didn't need to be taking any damage and just wasn't there.
It probably had to be 30-something unanswered blows too.
Yeah, and it was very hard to watch. I'll be honest, it was very, very hard to watch. And I do love the fact that he didn't rush to judgment and say that I'm done. I can never do this again. But the man. It'll always stick with me that, when with the point in his life that I met him, anybody that was just looking at a record would be like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. And he did. He made it to the USD. You know what I mean? He made it twice. And now, and he's a highly respected analyst. You know what I mean? He does a great job in his broadcasting work. And so it's not like, oh my God, if he gives up fighting, what will he do? Now he has no connection. Because sometimes there's two aspects of it. Number one, it's like, if you don't have any other skills in life or whatever, like, what do you do from there? Like, all I know how to do is fight. How do I make money? How do I support my family? That's number one. He's good. Number two, especially, man, like, this is a community, man. This is a place, that's it's your people that you're around. You know what I mean? And these are your friends, and these are the family that you know. And if you're disconnected from that, you wonder, like, how do I stay connected to the sport I love, to this community I love? Well, he's still got that too. So he's got income, he's got connections. So if he never wants to fight again, he won. He won, man. He came from nothing, and he's done very well to support his family, and he delivered on everything he ever promised he would. So if he never steps in there again,
fought for the championship of the world.
The guy never has to hang his head, man. I could see the emotion on his face. It just, like you said, it was hard to watch, especially somebody you care about in there. Clearly, like, the cage is not a place to be. The octagon is not a place to be if you're not all in, man. It is hard. And Dominic Reyes, man, savage, but 100% true. And dude, Dominic Reyes has been through his own dark days and struggles. For him to say, because there's a guy that has been through so much in his career that if he sees a guy struggling, could easily be impacted by having sympathy for that person, you know what I mean? And being like, I can't beat this dude up. Like, I feel bad for him. Like, but for Dominic Reyes to say, my job is to not care about what you're going through right now. You know what I mean? It's not my problem. You signed the dotted line and you got in there. And it may sound savage, but I mean, he said it in such a respectful way. It didn't sound rude, but that's the truth.
But his family's got to eat too.
Exactly. You got to go in there and be like, sorry, bro. I don't care what you're going through. I went years without a paycheck, and I got a family to support, and I got a mortgage to pay, and I got to put food on the table too, and I got to go out there and do what I got to do. So, yeah, I'm glad you brought this one up, because I can see a lot of people not necessarily wanting to talk about it, because it wasn't like there was like this amazing highlight, this amazing feel-good story out of it. It was hard to watch, but I just want to make it clear that, man, whatever Anthony Smith decides to do from here, man, that dude has served himself and his family incredibly well in life, and he can walk around with his head held high for damn sure.
But interesting enough, with that win, Dominic Reyes is now 2 in a row against a name of Anthony Smith. Back on the rise, which we said could happen. All the talent in the world, power, speed. I think where is he at? He's outside the top 10 for sure, but
just barely outside the top 10 though. He's hung on for a long time. I want to say, I was looking at earlier. I want to say that he's, in fact, I'll just pull it up so I don't get it right, because he's right outside of it. He's number 12. Yeah, they were 12 and 13 actually. Dominic Reyes was 12 and Anthony Smith was 13. So, there's a real. I mean, you talked on it going in about, hey, look, this is a maybe shockingly relevant fight, or maybe has a lot more meaning than people realize. And I think so, even in the way that it finished and the way that it played out, especially when you look at some of the names that are there. I mean, you got some names that have been around for a while.
Last fight, huge upset in Brazil, right? And MMA math doesn't mean a lot of stuff, but it does at the same time. Who's like 8, 9, 10 in that light heavyweight division?
So right, and this is why we're going to go to. So you look at some of the names. His names that have been around for a while. So if you got Dominic Reyes at 12, 8, 9, 10 right now. Nikita Krylov is number 8. Volkan Oezdemir is number 9. Johnny Walker is number 10. I mean, a name it's a little further up the rankings, but Carlos Ulberg just leaped up to number 7 after his recent performance. There's some really, he's going to get one of those names. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he's getting, the Ankalaev, Prohashka, Hill, Blachowicz, Rakic that's 1 through 5. But as far as the Khalil Roundtree, Carlos Ulberg, Nikita Krylov, Volkan Oezdemir, Johnny Walker, like, yeah, he's getting one of those. He's getting 5 through 10 next. I think. I don't think there's any way anywhere else.
Johnny Walker fight, people would want to see that still.
Absolutely. By the way, speaking of light heavyweights, did you see Jamahal Hill get booed? Jamahal felt so bad. And Jamahal, to his credit, man, they put him on screen and the whole place just booed. He kind of just like, come on, let's go. Let's break. Jamahal don't care.
He's a natural heel. He's a natural heel in everything he does, right? He don't give a damn. He's out for him and his. But he had a very interesting
It's favorite. He still might have my favorite social media clapback video of all time, and he's like, "That's what she said. That's what she said." Like, he's funny. I got Woods too back here. He's like, oh, he's the best. He's a heel.
Well, what do you think about his little run-in with the champ?
Well, that's interesting, right? Because I don't know that I don't know if he thought that was all going to go public, but it is that's one where a little bit of that Shama power. Like, if you run up on somebody and they say, "Then let's go," you know what I mean? Like, honestly, at that point, I would have liked to seen Jamahal Hill pick up the gloves and be like, "All right, let's go." And then at that point, people are going to start grabbing you and saying, "Gentlemen, no." But yeah, well, I mean, if you run up on somebody,
I want to see what led up to that, right? Because I think a lot of people are saying, like, you ain't about that life. You didn't put the gloves on. But I didn't see them walk in. I didn't see what it kind of picked up right when the jawing was happening. The gloves were thrown.
Well,
you know what I mean?
You're right. So I don't know the full backstory either. And it is also very important to note that I'm not suggesting for 1 second that the two of them should have gotten into a cage and started fighting, because guess what? They get highly compensated for that.
But
and that's the one that
damn cool.
But exactly. That's I just want you to be like, I'm going to do this. Like, we're playing a big game of chicken, and we're waiting for somebody to step in here and say, "Gentlemen," because there's a lot of people, like, they're not going to let. I mean, when you go into, hell no, they're going to come in there. They're not going to let that happen, right? But you got to just go, like, be about it. You know what I mean? So it was an interesting exchange, and I think Alex Pereira definitely got the best of that. But I don't think Jamahal cares one bit. You know what I mean? Again, he's somebody that's done well for himself, has made some nice paycheck, has positioned himself for some other nice paychecks. But that one, I think if we're scoring rounds on that one, Alex Pereira's got that one 10-9 for sure.
But long game, it could have paid huge dividends.
Oh, 100%. You don't think if that matchup gets put together, you don't think we're throwing that footage out there ad nauseam? We're watching that thing over and over, and it's getting brought up in press conferences, and it's getting brought up in media days, and you know what I mean? If we're gonna show footage of people throwing dollies through bus windows, like, we're definitely showing people throwing gloves at each other. You know what I'm saying? So
I don't think people understand how big of a dude Jamahal Hill really is, dude. That guy
really is
big.
Yeah, he's a big dude, man, for sure. So that was an interesting exchange for sure. But Alex Pereira, he's a stud.
Yeah, he's about that life.
He is. He is definitely.
Really quick before we go, looking forward next week, I think is a pretty awesome card. The top of the card is especially cool. Billy Q, Cub Swanson, Amanda Ribas, Mackenzie Dern, and then Chaos and Buckley, Colby Covington, Joaquin Buckley. All three of those fights I'm actually really looking forward to watching.
I am too. I think it's a really good card. That'll kind of close out the UFC schedule for the year, and then we'll have a couple weeks to a break where we kind of refocus and recenter. So that's the one off season we get. It's not like the NBA off season where we get a few months. We get like 3 weeks basically. So it'll be a great card, I think, to wrap things up on. And I'll just set the reminder that Friday night, the night before, set the table with CFFC 138 up in Atlantic City. We got a stacked card up there. My man CM Punk will be back in the booth on the mic. I think that the night before, I mean, you're the pro wrestling expert of us, but the night before Saturday night's main event returns as well, right? The same night as UFC Tampa. I believe that's, which I'll be honest with you, that's kind of funny for me because I've told the story before, but like when I was
there, it's clobbering time,
bro. Saturday night's main event to me when I was a little kid, I loved it, man. Like, dude, and my mom used to let me stay up late. You know what I mean? My mom would let me stay up late as a little kid and watch that, and that was what kind of got my journey going in combat sports. And you know, I've told it before, then I realized it was scripted, and I was like, well, I don't know. And I saw Muay Thai. You don't think it's real? You don't think this is real?
It's real to me, damn it.
That's all real to me. But I do always say scripted. I will never say fake because there's some athletic things going on in there, and they're taking some bumps.
Ask all CM Punk's joints how fake it is.
Boy, I'm telling you, man. So anyway, it was a full circle moment for me. But anyway, Punk will be back on Friday night in Atlantic City. I'm telling you, the card is stacked. CFFC 138. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. So tune in to us on Friday night on UFC Fight Pass. We'll set the table, and then Saturday, catch yourself a both. Maybe a little split screen action with some UFC. And where is Saturday night's man? Is it on Netflix now or Peacock or where is it? Is it Netflix?
Well, I have no idea.
Oh, I love it. See, you're actually we've taken you all the way back in the MMA world now. The pro wrestling game is losing you. It's losing your focus.
There's only so many hours in my day now with 3 kids, honestly, and pro wrestling is losing.
Hey,
this happens.
We've got the tentacles in you. We're dragging you back.
Listen, MMA always was number one, you know? Family number one. He's like, MMA was always number one, but then once we got the 3rd kid, then I was like, all right, now the balance shifts over here in this favor. I mean, man, there's only so many hours in the day. But anyways, this was fun. UFC 310, it delivered. For me, it delivered. Yep. Pantoja's that damn good. That's just the way it is. Rakhmonov, he's still great. Ian Machado Garry, respect burger. I'm anxious to see. I think Belal Muhammad has supreme confidence though going into that Rakhmonov fight. I do too. We didn't really touch on that much, but I do too. I think that made him, not that he didn't have it before, but I honestly think that performance made Belal Muhammad feel even more confident about where he stands. Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see. Well, I think he is. I think he's going to try and put Rakhmonov on his back. I agree. That's what he does. So, anyways, with that being said, for John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.